world leaders are continuing to address the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Just yesterday, we heard from leaders from Brazil, the US, and here in South Africa who've delivered their statements. No surprises this morning, so much reaction off the back of what they've had to say. On the African continent, Malawians are waiting with bated breath for the official announcement of last week's election results. Let's distill all of this for you. Bring in now veteran international news journalist Sophie Mokoena, who joins us via our telephone line. Lovely to speak to you once again, Ms. Sophie. Thanks very much indeed for the time. And what a time it is. Perhaps we'll begin on the African continent. It seems Peter Mutharika is mounting quite the political comeback.
Yes, indeed. The former president of Malawi is performing very well. The current president, the incumbent Lazarus Chakwera, seems to be struggling to catch up. We expect that he might continue with this lead. We know that yesterday, President Lazarus Chakwera went to the Supreme Court trying to stop counting, but the highest court in that land ruled that counting must continue. And therefore, we suspected that this was going to happen, that it will be difficult for the incumbent when he is losing power to quickly relinquish power or accept the trends that were emerging. And it might even lead to a situation where the results might be contested because, it's difficult to accept the results from some leaders. This was his first term. He was hoping that he will be able to get a second term.
Absolutely. And in fact, Malawi itself has dealt with a scenario like that before where results were contested. But help us understand the circumstances that led to Peter Mutharika's comeback, as it were. What is it about what's happening in Malawi that's moved voters from Lazarus Chakwera, it seems, to their former president?
Mutharika himself lost elections to Lazarus Chakwera because Malawians were upset because it's the poorest country in the region and on the continent, one of the poorest countries that is very indebted with IMF and World Bank loans. And in the countryside, you see the poverty that the country is grappling with. And Malawians were hoping that Lazarus Chakwera will turn things around with his coalition. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. And therefore, clearly, citizens of Malawi, knowing the value of their vote, have decided to put someone ahead right now because we can't say Mutharika has won until the Electoral Commission announces the results. But clearly, Malawians have decided that it can't be business as usual. Many people were quite critical about what he was doing and the optics of being in the office. Asking people to go to the airport when you are traveling, the whole country must go and say farewell, and when you come back, the whole country must stop. They must go to the airport, welcome back. You'd recall during COVID when he went to the United Kingdom, to London, to go and do a virtual conference. And that virtual conference in London, does it mean your infrastructure, your internet in Malawi, it's not that good that you go to another country? That was a serious indictment. And therefore, I think it is how he handles the privilege, not the right, that was given to him to lead the nation, that has led to the nation not having confidence in him. So we are now waiting for the results.
And we'll see how things go. We should know how things are fared, I think, by the end of the day. But let's turn our attention to the United Nations General Assembly, and what a day it was. Donald Trump, I think you still have excerpts of his speech running on international news broadcasts. And it comes as no surprise, given his meandering speech, as it's been described, lasting for about an hour or so, where he was firing from all cylinders, it seems.
Many people are quite shocked in terms of what came out of the speech. and the optics generally, the lift that was not working, the teleprompt that was not working, and him weighing in criticizing the United Nations for no apparent reason. This is a world body, and they themselves, the leaders, are the people who are supposed to ensure that the world body, the United Nations, is effective in all the assignments it is doing. Particularly, let's look at peace and security. He criticized the United Nations, saying that it's not doing enough to ensure peace in conflict areas. Let's look at the Security Council. These are countries, particularly the United States of America and the others with veto powers. When the issues are brought before the Security Council to take a decisive action to stop wars or conflicts, what do? They exercise their veto power based on their personal interests, and therefore those resolutions not going through. When the General Assembly has adopted a resolution, the implementation, the member states don't implement. And for example, the war in Ukraine, it has been raging on. How many resolutions have been brought before the Security Council? The Middle East question, the Palestine question, and now the Gaza conflict. How many times we've seen resolutions before the Security Council to act? And what do the member states do, the countries, and getting orders from their capitals? They veto those resolutions. Recently, America did that. So how do you, as a UN, the world board, stop the war, particularly the civil servant and a super civil servant, the Secretary General? How many times he has complained about these issues? The war in the DRC, he said he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize because he has stopped 7 wars, including a conflict in the DRC. A day after the DRC president told people in America, where he was addressing the Congolese in the diaspora, that the war is still raging on. Come on, Mr. President, you don't know what's happening right now in the DRC. That war hasn't stopped. It has escalated in the eastern part of the DRC. And many other issues. On the issue of climate, I mean, he talks about hope, but we've seen the dire consequence of climate change. And so many people were not happy. And the speech didn't address the global challenges. It was more of President Trump himself and the America and what he has done for Americans, even talking about how he was elected, but also about America. Very inward-looking, and I can say even insulting leaders that their countries will go to hell.
Absolutely. Extraordinary statements from an individual who's still seen as the leader of the free world. But I suppose that's what we get. President Cyril Ramaphosa also having an opportunity to, of course, make his own contributions at that gathering. He's used the time on that podium to double down on some of the stuff he's mentioned before: South Africa's stance on the war in Gaza, our G20 presidency, and the lack of representation at the Security Council.
My observation is that when President Ramaphosa is on international podium, he delivers a decisive message, a clear message, no ambiguity, and also very decisive and very strong in terms of representing South Africa and holding the line. This speech, the president did set the record straight on many criticisms that have been leveled against South Africa as it relates to its foreign policy. And on the issue of the Middle East, I mean, he told leaders for the first time, that big audience, that look, the war in Gaza, we, a small country, we had to take action using the UN system, using the International Court, which is an organ of the UN, to settle this problem or to seek intervention to stop many lives that we've lost now. If the world had rallied behind South Africa, we wouldn't be talking about these numbers and the distraction we see today. Secondly, he did speak about South Africa's foreign policy of non-interference, but pushing for resolutions of conflict through diplomatic means. And South Africa's foreign policy as it relates to respect for international law. The transformation of the United Nations, particularly the Security Council that I've spoken about for so many years. Africa doesn't have a permanent seat in the Security Council, but many challenges are on the continent, and many countries sometimes are on the agenda of the Security Council. The other issue, the transformation of the financial system. The IMF and the World Bank currently, their mandate has reached a sell-by date. They are not addressing challenges facing member states. We've just spoken about Malawi, how Malawi is indebted in terms of IMF and World Bank loans.
Right.
Because those loans, sometimes when you pay, they are just equal to your GDP and you are squeezed. So he spoke about that. And finally, spoke about or giving report on the coming G20 in South Africa and linking it with the work of the United Nations. You saw the synergy there,
sure,
that his constant communication with the SG has led to the UN also having a say in terms of the theme of the conference or the summit, the G20 summit in November.
Absolutely. No matter where you stand, multilateralism certainly, I suppose, on trial in some respects, and we'll see how the rest of the General Assembly meeting continues.